Alright, so we're going to take some time here to talk about warm water spey. Warm water spey is a super unique type of fishing that kind of is built off of the idea of swinging for trout or salmon or steelhead, but we're applying those principles in a warm water setting where we don't have trout in these rivers. We're fishing for warm water species. And so I want to just show you guys a little bit of today how we can actually apply these principles, even though it's not going to be nearly as effective like this type of fishing is not the most productive type of fishing. But that's not why we do it. That's not why we spey cast. That's not why we swing flies. Swinging flies is just a whole new rhythm to get yourself into, and so this will hopefully kind of show you a little bit about that and how you can actually apply it on a warm water river, regardless of if you have trout or not. So today, set up with a Echo TR 11-foot 3/4-weight rod, and I've got it paired with a Fluger Medalist 1494.5. And then as far as a line, I've got the Rio Skagit Mini Max, which is a 275 grain. I think it's a number 3 technically. And it's an integrated line, which means that when you cast that head out, as it transitions to the running line, it's all one piece. And you'll see that as we kind of get into it today. That's really important in a warm water river to have an integrated line, in my opinion, because you're oftentimes going to be stripping that fly back in past your head, and as that head clunks back into the guides, if you've just got a head separate from a running line, it's really a pain to work with. So I'm a big fan of integrated lines when you're doing warm water spey. As far as what you should be looking for, just like you're swinging flies anywhere else in the world, you want to make sure you've got some sort of even current that you're working with. And in a lot of these warm water rivers, as you can see behind me, we've got timber in the water, so it's a good idea to try to find places where you think you have more of a gravelly or a rocky bottom, where you might not have as many of these snags like in a back eddy where you might have to deal with hanging up a lot. And so a lot of the water that I try to focus on is that even walking speed water, just like you would if you were out swinging in a Pacific Northwest stream, and going from there. Today, working with primarily a Skagit setup. I've got a 50-50 tip on, so 5 foot of T8 and 5 foot floating coming off the end of that. That's a Rio tip, a Rio Mo tip. And just make sure that you're being consistent as far as your leader length. My leader is probably about 5 feet long. That might be a touch longer than a lot of people like. But as long as you set up your leader the same way, it's going to help you with your cast as you're doing that two-handed cast. Make sure you're consistent with whatever your setup is. Try to have your fly a similar weight to what you're used to. Now, I am by no means the expert on this topic. I've done it for quite a few years at this point, and I love it, but there's always more to learn, and I'm learning more every time I go out. And so I would encourage you, if you're going to explore this realm, to do the same. Learn along the way. Don't think that you have it all figured out, because you'll always learn from people who do things differently than you do. And so if you guys have some ideas, feel free to share them below in the comments, and I'd be happy to learn from you guys as well. So what I've got right below me is I've got a nice even current coming off kind of a rocky little shelf right here on this edge. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my fly just straight out from me. I don't even really have to do much of a cast at this point, and just let this fly get down and then let it swing in this current. Again, we're trying to get an even current for this swing. I like to kind of give my rod a little wiggle along the way, little twitches. You get to change the angle of your swing as well. So right now I'm swinging pretty slow, and I can feel my fly actually tap in the bottom. And so on this next one, I'm gonna adjust. I'm gonna strip my fly back in. I'm gonna go right into my next cast. And on this next one, I'm gonna throw it about in the same spot, but instead of letting it get down and swing a little slower, I'm actually gonna start my swing pretty quickly. And that just is gonna keep that fly up off the bottom a touch, let that fly swing through a little bit quicker. And I found that in warm water spey specifically, I tend to not have as much success on the dead, pure swing that maybe you would do out west for steelhead or Alaskan rainbows or whatever. I tend to do better when I'm giving that fly some action. In fact, I often will catch fish on the strip back straight after a swing. So swing it all the way down, I suspect some fish will kind of be interested in it, and then as soon as we add that strip at the end all the way back up, don't discount that, because that's a great time to get an eat. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just adding a little bit of line each cast. I have not moved yet, I'm still in the same location. I'm starting to cover new water just by adding line to my cast. So don't rush. The water clarity here today is pretty actually good for the Des Moines River. We're looking at, I don't know, 2.5 to 3 feet of visibility, which is pretty impressive. But our water is getting lower later in the summer, and so there's just some decent visibility, meaning I don't have to cover water quite so thoroughly. I'm still gonna cover it thoroughly, more thoroughly than I would in a super crystal clear stream, but also I can still keep it moving, even though it's a dirty river. It is rare when doing warm water spay to get that picturesque walking speed steelhead run. It just doesn't happen. And so you're gonna have to kind of put some funny little mends in your line. You're gonna have to strip through some uneven current. You're gonna have to work around logs. Like, you're gonna have to work through those things on your own time and at your own speed, because warm water spay is not quite as cut and dry as I suppose the real thing. So I got this cast way out toward the middle of the river, which I feel like has a good amount of depth, and I am not bumping the bottom. So what I'm gonna do in this next cast, might have just touched a fish. So what I'm gonna do on this next cast, I don't think that was a bump, but I'm actually gonna cast just a touch farther upstream. Not upstream at all by any means, but a little more perpendicular to me. What that does is then when I throw this mend in it, it gives the fly the time to settle. We're settling still. I'm not swinging at all. Nothing tight here. I'm still settling. And now I'm finally into that swing. That just gave that fly a lot of time to sink. Now, you could switch out tips and also get that sink that way, but it's kind of a hassle to switch tips all the time, so try to kind of find a tip that works where you're at, whatever your flows are, and then just roll with it and then adjust as you need to. Something that I've had success with swinging flies is letting that fly just hang on the hang down, like not just hang for a second or two, like let it hang. Especially those channel catfish that might not be the chase down and eat from 10 feet away type predators, very often at least. They find it hard to resist a fly that's, you know, dangled in their face for 5-10 seconds at a time. So if you can find a seam where your fly is swinging right into it, not a bad idea to let it hang there for a while. You'll notice that as I'm stripping in, I strip a certain number of strips and then I coil that line. So you'll watch me do it on this one too, but if you end up with a bunch of running line piled at your feet, it's going to be pretty impossible to get it all to cast back out. So it's nice to have these coils of line to manage getting ready to make that long cast. It shoots out a lot easier when you have those coils. And I'm not the best line manager out there, but it does certainly help, even though I don't do it perfectly. I think there's some tricky things with warm water spay, like setting the hook can be a little tricky because, yes, I'm fishing water that's close to walking speed, but to be honest, it's a little bit slower than that. And so letting a fish hook themselves is not always an option, because if you just let that rod kind of hang, and the fish might grab it and run upstream, especially these more predatory fish like a smallmouth, you're usually going to have to throw some sort of hook set in there. which usually leads to me flailing. One thing that I will never claim to be is a perfect caster, both single hand or two hand. So as you're watching what I'm doing, take it with a grain of salt. If you really care about technical casting, I'm not your guy to talk to. I'm more interested in holding a fish in my hand or in my net than throwing a rod around all day, as I sit here doing warm water spay and probably not going to get a single bite all day. As far as what species you might run into in warm water spay, I find that if you've got a good smallmouth stream, that is a lot of fun on the two-hander. Smallmouth are aggressive. They'll eat a swung fly. They'll eat a stripped fly. That's a lot of fun. But other species that we run into include walleye, catch channel catfish, catch white bass, wipers. And so all of those species are susceptible to taking a swung fly. And there's even others too. I mean, we've caught smallmouth buffalo on a swing, freshwater drum, guys that even in clear waters, when they can see them, they'll actually swing flies right in front of common carp, catch them swinging flies. So just play around with it, experiment, see what you can learn along the way.